Welcome to the Recovery 2.0 online conference. I'm your host, Tommy Rosen, and today I am absolutely delighted to be speaking with Rich Roll. Rich is a globally renowned plant-based ultra-endurance athlete, wellness advocate, best-selling author, acclaimed public speaker, husband, and father of 4. At age 40, Rich made a decision to overhaul the sedentary throes of overweight middle age. Adopting a plant-based diet, he reinvented himself as an ultra-distance endurance athlete. He chalked up top finishes at the Ultraman World Championships and cemented his place in the pantheon of endurance greats by becoming the first of only 2 people ever to complete Epic 5. If you don't know what that is doing 5 Ironman events on 5 Hawaiian islands within a single week. When he isn't lost on a trail or spending time with his family, he hosts the wildly popular Rich Roll podcast, topping charts on iTunes. Rich, I'm so grateful to you for lending your voice, wisdom, and experience to the Recovery 2.0 audience. Welcome.
It's great to be here, Tommy, and I love the work that you're doing with Recovery 2.0, and addiction and recovery is something that I love talking about and I love sharing, so it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak with you today and to your audience.
Well, thank you. I have more questions for you than are going to be able to be covered in our time, but we'll jump right in here. If you would share a bit about your experience of addiction in your life, and particularly coming to that moment where a change had to take place.
Sure. I think I grew up in a household where all my needs were met. My parents were not addicts or alcoholics. We grew up sort of upper middle class in Washington, D.C. But I was one of those kids, and you hear this a lot in recovery, that just felt like I didn't fit in. I lacked the rule book to life that everybody else seemed to have. And as a result of that, I was kind of a loner kid. I had difficulty connecting with other people, kind of somebody who learned how to isolate early and often. And, was bullied throughout, junior high school and the like. And my drunk-a-log story really isn't all that extraordinary. It's pretty mundane. It's like a lot of alcoholics. I guess I would preface it by saying that when I was fairly young, I discovered the sport of swimming, and it was the first thing that I was actually good at naturally, and so I gravitated towards that. And that became kind of like my safe place, when my head was underwater, all the noises that were circulating in my mind and all the kind of stressors and anxiety that I experienced, in school and outside in the world would kind of evaporate. And so, that was where I wanted to go to feel good and feel safe. And as a result of having some success in that area, by the time I was a senior in high school, I was one of the top swimmers in the country. I was recruited at colleges and all that kind of good stuff. I had yet to explore or experience drugs or alcohol. And I ultimately ended up leaving Washington, D.C., going to California to swim at Stanford. And that's where I discovered the beautiful potion known as alcohol. And it was really like, I very vividly remember the first time that I got drunk, and it was like that warm blanket that enveloped me, and suddenly all my, problems that I didn't even know that I had seemed to evaporate, and I felt amazing. And in many ways, I credit it with providing me with a social life and some social skills. Like, it kind of broke me out of my shell and my isolationism. And for a while it worked. Of course it worked. We do it because it works for a while, right? And I had a really good time, but it wasn't long before it started to negatively impact everything else in my life. And my interest in swimming in school started to fall by the wayside, and until really all I cared about was trying to find where my next good time would be. And that sort of progressed over the years. I moved to New York City, which was like Disneyland for alcoholics after college. And that's where things really kind of kicked in.
Before we come to the New York City piece of this story, I just wanted to remark that here you are at the top of your game as a a university swimmer. You're swimming at Stanford. You're sort of, you've made it as a swimmer. And so, whatever kind of gratification a person can get in their ego and in their life from having achieved something like that, you now have that. And yet it's at this period of your life when you really first find alcohol and really feel what it has to offer you.
Yeah. I was somebody who, when I was 18, 19 years old, I had the world on a string. I had achieved so much as a young person. I struggled in school when I was younger, and swimming gave me the discipline to attack my academics. And as a result of, really being devoted to my sport and to school, I was, I got into every college I applied to, right? I got into Harvard, I got into Princeton, I went to Stanford. It was the #1 swimming school in the country, as well as, this top academic institution. And so I had a lot of promise, and I think my parents had a lot of investment in that as well. It's a complicated emotional kind of web there. And so, yeah, drugs and alcohol destroyed all of that. It really did. It destroyed my potential as an athlete. It killed my curiosity. Like, basically, it just took everything away that I'd worked so hard as a young person to achieve.
Yes. It does dash a lot of misconceptions about addiction. For those people who are watching this, who may have ever thought that, oh, well, you're going to fall into drugs and alcohol when you are off track, when you're not on your game, when you're not succeeding, when you're not achieving. You had succeeded in a certain way, and you had achieved in a certain way. And yet it certainly wasn't enough to keep you safe from the throes of addiction.
No, I mean, that's where the cunning, baffling, and powerful part comes in. Like, why would somebody who had so much, going in their favor, make those decisions that I made, and because it doesn't make any logical sense, of course.
Yes.
And when you're in it, you can't see it.
Thank you. So you head off to New York, and this is where you can really, really flex your addiction muscles.
It was it was awesome. It was just, good times all the time. I was in a job where I wasn't getting paid very much, but I figured out very quickly how to get my fix and make the most of it on, pennies on the dollar. And I had a lot of fun there too, but that's where things started to really, get dark. And I was pretty much a pure alcoholic. Like, I dabbled in other drugs, but I never got into hard drugs. And I think I avoided ever even trying cocaine, because I knew, even though I wasn't ready to admit that I was an alcoholic, I knew that it was a problem for me. And I was terrified that if I tried something like cocaine, that it would be game over. So I stuck to alcohol. But, alcohol was pernicious enough. And I was just that guy who just never wanted to quit. Every night I was ready to go, and I was the last guy to leave the party. And, I was the guy blacking out and, waking up in strange places. And at first it's fun, and your buddies give you, shit about it. But then, then it becomes really kind of a sad state of affairs, and it just progressed from there.
It stops being a funny matter at a certain point. What this is your 20s now we're talking about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And are you one of those fortunate folks who got sober in your 20s still?
No, I didn't get sober until I was 31. I still had more pain that I needed to invite into my life. I went through that experience in New York City, and somehow I scraped my way through law school at Cornell after that. I still to this day have no idea how I graduated, because I was a mess. And, I was still able to function when I absolutely had to at critical moments. So graduated law school, got a good job in a law firm in San Francisco, came out west again to work. And, I just was not interested in what I was doing professionally. All I cared about was what I was going to do when I could leave the office and go out at night. And that's when, it started to become a situation of me drinking alone and hiding my drinks and lying, and starting to really cultivate this dark second, sort of secret life.
Mm-hmm. And so for me, as I look back at that sort of period of my using, I did get sober very young. I was 22 when I first got sober, but there was this incredible duality. The persona that I actually believed I was presenting to the world, which of course, I would show up at summer school, for example, and ashen pale, thin, gaunt, like coughing through the class. And I thought I was looking good, and the girls in that class really wanted to get with me, I was sure, but I felt that I was presenting a healthy and exciting young man to the world, anything but the truth. But of course, inside I actually was aware. There was a denial to the outside, but inside I could concede to myself that I had a problem. And eventually that problem became unbearable to me, intolerable to me. How did that go for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think of course, in your heart of hearts, you can't lie to yourself. And so what I was starting to experience was a progressive level of sort of shame that would grow, was growing inside of me. And that drove me to further isolate and to, further kind of put up those walls to make it look like everything was going well, and trying to convince myself that nobody could see, what was really going on. But of course, that's a delusion in and of itself, because everybody, everybody knows. You think you're getting away with this stuff, but you're not, right? And it's just a ticking time bomb.
Yes. I talk a lot about and write a lot about and work with a lot of people around this concept of bottom. What is a bottom? How does that vary from person to person? Is it necessary to reach one in order to change? What does that look like? When we talk about bottom, we're talking about this moment at which you're finally willing to tell the truth and be able to pivot in some way that can turn you off a course of towards pain and what I would call a path of fate, and put you onto a path of destiny, which can lead to some pretty extraordinary places. Did you have a defined bottom like that?
I did, but it wasn't. Well, I guess it's a little bit more complicated than that. And I guess in order to answer that, to take it a step back, I think that everyone who gets sober has a bottom, and that bottom is different for everybody. I think it's sometimes it's event driven. Something terrible happens and it shakes you up enough that you're able to see yourself honestly in the mirror, and you become ready to be accountable to that. But it doesn't have to be that. I think it occurs when you are adequately spiritually vacant, and that vessel needs to be filled in other ways. For me, pain is really the only thing that's ever motivated me to change any of my errant ways. But I don't think that you have to be in pain to change. It's just easier. We have that choice available to us. It's just so much more difficult when our backup isn't up against it. But in my case, I went through a disastrous marriage situation. I had a wedding and a marriage that ended on the honeymoon. And it was, sort of, on the grandest scale for me, which was this sort of transpired in front of all the people that I loved the most and cared the most about. It was horribly, shameful for me and embarrassing. And I had to drink for like a year in the wake of that because it was so painful. And the idea of not drinking and not medicating through that process was intolerable for me. But basically, that was my bottom. It just took me a while of self-medication before I was really ready to grapple with it. And then one day I woke up, hungover, and it was a day not unlike, every other sort of typical day. But at this point, I was a round the clock drinker at the end, vodka tonic in the shower, and basically a tall boy between my legs, driving to work in Los Angeles and hiding drinks throughout the day and doing that whole deal. And then just woke up one day and I was ready. I was just ready. And I'd been seeing an addiction therapist at the time, and I'd been sort of making deals with him, and I had been exploring I had been court ordered to go to AA. I got 2 DUIs in 2 months, was facing jail time, and that's a whole long, crazy story. So I had, some serious repercussions that I was facing at the time that still couldn't get me sober. And I was sort of being a tourist in AA, showing up late, sitting in the back, not raising my hand, and of course not able to stay sober. And so I sort of made a deal with my therapist after a relapse. And I told him, if I relapse one more time, I'll go to treatment, because he was trying to cajole me into the idea of doing it. But I thought I was so important and I couldn't leave my job. It's like that whole masturbatory thing that
Yes.
you do to prevent having to do that. And so I relapsed again. And because I thought of myself as a man of my word, I would say, okay, I'll do this, And so I decided to go to treatment. It was booked a flight up to a place called Springbrook. That's outside Portland. Now it's owned by Hazelton. It's a Hazelton now. And I thought I was going to go for, 2 or 3 weeks for a spin dry. But when I arrived in detox and actually started talking to these counselors and I was able to sort of be honest and really tell people what I was actually doing for the very first time, they said, listen, you have a case of alcoholism that we typically see in 65-year-old lifelong drinkers. And we think, you'd be well advised to stick around a little bit longer than 28 days. And, I was willing. I was blessed with willingness. I was like, I'm here. I'm going to do this deal. And I ended up staying in rehab for 100 days. And that experience not only saved my life, but really gave me a toolbox and a framework to be able to start putting my life back together, premised on spiritual principles that now are, a fundamental aspect of how I live my life and make decisions and, do everything that I do.
Thank you so much, Rich. That's an incredible story. And I'm thinking now about the spiritual piece of your story as you've related it. You've used that word a couple of times. And I've actually joked around with members of my team that we're building a new membership site now. And in the corner, we're going to have a small box that says, click here to learn about recovery that has nothing to do with spirituality. Mm-hmm. And you'll click there and then it's just a blank page.
I love that.
There'll be nothing there. Wow. But the term spirituality, when we're getting into these matters, people can be so resistant and so confused and it's such a thick, there's so much thick prejudice around it. And yet I feel it's such an important element of humanity and human life. And of course, being on a path of recovery, I don't know how one could try to parse out or separate out that aspect of humanity. Could you speak a little bit about that? It's very important for people watching because this comes up all the time in our community.
Yeah. Well, for me, I'll tell you straight up, it's all spiritual. Everything is spiritual. And it's not like there is a spiritual component or aspect to my recovery. My recovery in and of itself is spiritual. And like you said, you can't parse that out because that is basically, the fundamental premise upon how I've been able to, climb out of this dark cave of addiction. And to kind of set the framework for that, I didn't grow up in some kind of hippie new age household. My my dad wears a seersucker suit and he's a Washington, D.C. lawyer. And my mom is a teacher. I grew up in a liberal minded, but fairly sort of, traditional household. We went to church on Sunday. I went to Sunday school, did that whole deal. Never resonated with me, never clicked in, never considered myself a religious person, and really never thought that much about God or my interior life whatsoever. So I would say that, I had some resistance to those ideas coming into sobriety, but I didn't have what a lot of people experience, which, people who have had really bad negative experiences with traditional religion. I didn't have that. I just didn't care for it, so there was a little bit of a barrier for me. And, it's difficult for people that have that resistance to open up to it. It's very, very loaded, for a lot of people. And so I'm sympathetic to that. But I think in order to really embrace recovery and ultimately your potential as a human being, you have to understand that we are spiritual beings. Like I still remember, I think it was like 2 weeks into rehab when one of the counselors said, "Rich, are you a human being having a spiritual experience, or are you a spiritual being having a human experience?" And I said, like, I just had to pause. I was like, what are you even talking about? I don't understand the question, let alone know how to answer that. Like I literally could not stop thinking about that question because I didn't understand it. And now, of course, I understand and embrace the fact that we are all spiritual beings having a human experience. And that requires a little bit of open-mindedness, I think, but get over it, man. You know, get over it and understand that we're all, you know, on this spinning globe, you know, hurling into infinity. We're here for a very short period of time, and try to step outside your ego and have a little humility for the fact that perhaps we're not able to really understand everything that's going on. You know, perhaps there are things that elude us, and all you have to do is look to quantum physics and understand the craziness that happens when you get down into subatomic particles, to be able to embrace a little bit of that humility and allow some space to cultivate that sense of spiritual connection. And if you can do that, I think you'll root yourself in a place where you have a better chance of really unlocking, you know, a more authentic version of yourself, a self that you can be more comfortable with, that you can express more freely. And ultimately that, in my opinion, is the path to recovery.
Thank you. I'm looking at recovery these days as something that definitely happens in stages. And I feel that different people need different things at different times. So I don't feel like there's a one size fits all, or, you know, this is absolutely, you know, like when they release a diet for everyone in the world, that doesn't necessarily make sense to me, because different people may be able to access it at certain points. But with recovery, I'm basically seeing, if I'm going to generalize a little bit, I'm seeing two sort of main stages. There's a stage where, let's say you want to get sober, you've made the decision, I have an issue, I need help with this issue. You get help with this issue. And let's say, since we're talking about the 12-step path, let's say you embrace the 12-step path and you achieve recovery. So what I mean by that is that first stage of achieving recovery, you are no longer thinking about using drugs and alcohol. There's an element of freedom from that kind of craving and that kind of the craven kind of thinking that we can get into. Many people reach that stage successfully, and then there's something else that happens. These other addictions start to creep in. Life starts to happen. Relationships start to happen, or not. And there's this second level of something more seems to be needed to get over the hill to the next level of recovery, which I feel is a grander platform of freedom, which could possibly carry a human being through the rest of their life on this path. It seems to me, in looking at your story, that you have very clearly experienced those two stages that I'm talking about, and that the second stage always requires kind of another bottom. But this time it's a bottom within recovery where you can't point to drugs and alcohol because drugs and alcohol have been removed from your life. For me, that came on the tail end of some painful relationships, very skewed perspective on money, a lot of pain there. And in reading your story, I think you had somewhat of a midlife crisis based in the physical, based around your body and creativity and what you could do versus what you were doing. Could you speak about that a little bit, stages and how you've seen that? Yeah,
that's beautifully put and very astute. And I would agree wholeheartedly that, you know, recovery is a multi-stage process. And, you know, for me, well, I guess I would say, you know, once you get past that sort of craven relationship with substance or behavior patterns that, you know, created the havoc in your life, you're left with yourself, right? And then it becomes about, what are you going to do with that? And what does that mean to you? And if you're not willing to really look at that and get into, you know, whether it's childhood trauma or other behavior patterns that sort of led you towards, you know, your substance abuse problem, then you are really lending a blind eye towards, a problem that will continue to persist and replicate, havoc in your life in different ways. But in my case, once I put together a little bit of time, all I cared about at the time, and this is a testament to where my sort of spiritual evolution was at the moment, because I had been a young person with so much promise and somebody who had predicated their life on this idea of the American dream and what that encapsulated. For me, it was about getting back on that track. It was about, sort of repairing all the wreckage that I had created, not just in my relationships, but professionally. So I could get back on that trajectory towards, success. Right. And so for me, that translated into, becoming a bit of a workaholic. I was steadfast that I was going to be like a partner in a big law firm and, bank a huge salary and have a super nice sports car, all that kind of stuff, without ever really thinking about whether that's what I wanted for myself or whether that was something that I was here on this earth to express, but more just because I still had this deep-seated insecurity and felt like if I could achieve that then I could be recognized, in the eyes of my parents or in the eyes of, those kids who beat me up in 7th grade or what have you. Right. And so to the extent that aspect of my, ailing soul left unaddressed, I continued down that path, and that's what I did. So for 9 years of sobriety, it was about that very thing. And I was successful in that. By the time I was 39, successful entertainment lawyer in Los Angeles, driving a super nice car, like all those trappings, of that sort of characterized success that were marketed to in every billboard and in every TV commercial, that carries that implicit promise of not only sort of security and prosperity, but of course, happiness. And it wasn't until I was 38, 39 years old where I started to have this, really kind of deep-seated spiritual malaise or disease, if you will, in many ways, where I started to experience such dissonance between who this person that I had become and this kind of dormant, more actualized version of myself that I'd never taken a moment to even look at or think about. Because I never thought about what it was that I wanted to do or what I should be doing. I was just doing what I was supposed to do. So I was having a real existential crisis. Like we call it like a midlife crisis, but it really wasn't that. It was a crisis of the soul, where my soul was in so much pain because it had been so repressed for so long that it was starting to really, rebel and come out sideways. And so meanwhile, I wasn't using drugs and alcohol, but I was medicating through work and I was medicating through horrible diet and lifestyle habits. I become a junk food addict. For me, it was McDonald's, Jack in the Box, taking out Chinese food, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell every single day.
Wow.
Terrible, right?
Wow.
And I never thought, even though I'd been in sobriety for many years, and I would hear people in meetings talk about how they were modulating their emotions through food, I never understood that. I was like, what does that mean? I don't get it. I never thought about that in my own context, even though I was so blatantly doing that myself. And so this existential crisis that I was having was kind of, percolating to the surface. And shortly before I turned 40, it really just collided with a health crisis that was a direct result of, how I was eating and behaving. And so I had this moment on a staircase, it was like the night before I turned 40. I'd been working late. I came home, hammered, a bunch of Jack in the Box cheeseburgers on the car on the way home, and was walking up to my bedroom, and I had to stop up a simple flight of stairs. I was like winded, out of breath, tightness in my chest, sweat on my brow, and really fear in my heart. My grandfather died of a heart attack at a young age, and he had been a champion swimmer. In his days, I was named after him. And, my mother would always say, you got to watch out about what you eat and blah, blah, blah. But, you don't listen to your mom like that. I just never paid attention to it. In that moment, it was a very, succinct, crystallized moment where I realized, like, I can't live like this anymore, because I've been looking at myself in the mirror And the person that I saw reflected back to me was still that Stanford swimmer, even though I was 50 pounds overweight and I didn't look anything like that person. And so that's another level of denial, right?
Mm.
But I had enough awareness to realize the preciousness of this moment, because it was very similar to that day that I decided to go to rehab. Had I blown off that decision and postponed it for another day, who knows whether I would have ever made it.
Yes.
So there's an urgency to these little, cracks, when the door cracks open, where you have to jump, and you got to jump right away, and you got to get into action immediately, because they pass and they may not come back. And thank God I had enough awareness to recognize that, this moment I was having was very similar to that day that I got sober. And so, I jumped into action, and that was, really the beginning of what I had no idea would lead me down this path, which ultimately has been much more about, living more authentically and living more in, consistent with, this person that I've always been, that I've been repressing for the vast majority of my entire life.
Yes, it's remarkable. Thank you for sharing that. So I'd refer to that as your second bottom. There could have been others along the way, but I call that the second.
Oh, for sure.
So was it right away that you decided to change the diet piece of your life and to adopt a plant-based diet? Like right away, that was where you were headed?
No, it was much more gradual than that. The first thing I did was like a 7-day vegetable juice cleanse. Like I felt like that would sort of be like that would be like rehab for food. I could like do, put myself in a sort of structured week. Yes. Where I could wean myself off of these terrible foods and see what that would do. And it was like being in rehab. I felt terrible for a couple of days. I was laying on the couch. My wife was like, wow, look at him. Like he can't, like that's amazing. See, make it a day. And I'd never gone an entire day in my life without eating solid food. So this was uncharted territory for me. But, as people in recovery, as recovering addicts and alcoholics, like we know how to weather a detox, right? Like, that if you just stick in it, if you stay with it, if you weather those first couple days, that, the sky will start to clear and
it'll get better.
Exactly what happened. So at the end of that 7-day period, I felt incredible. I felt almost high, actually. Like I had this resurgence in vitality and energy and mental acuity that I hadn't experienced in a very long time. And it was so profound and so dramatic. The idea that in just 7 days, by doing something different, that you could shift your, how you felt about yourself and your energy levels and all like that in such a profound way, really led me on this quest to trying to find a way to eat that would allow me to feel like that all the time. Because the alcoholic in me was like, oh, I'm just going to do this forever. I found the solution, right? And my wife's like, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea, like, bring me down to earth. But of course, the alcoholism is like, I'm just never going to eat food again. So,
yes.
So she had to disabuse me of that bad idea. But then it was about 6 or 8 months of playing around with different ways of eating and just experimenting on myself. It wasn't a result of reading any book or watching any documentary. And most of the stuff didn't work, and kind of played around with vegetarianism and kind of, my denial was still there. I would like, I'll be a vegetarian. And then I'd just go to Pizza Hut and leave the pepperoni off, or, just stuff like that. Like I had to go through all of that to kind of get to a place where I was really ready to, to get serious about it. And ultimately, a third bottom would be, after playing around with all these diets in a half-hearted kind of way, realizing like, let me just try something really serious. And that's when I decided I was going to try a 100% plant-based diet, no dairy, no meat, no processed foods. And not only did I not think it was going to make a big difference, I actually didn't want it to, because it sounded horrible and like this sort of self-flagellating, deprivation-oriented diet. But within about a week of that experiment, I felt like I did on that 7th day of the juice cleanse. Like I felt incredible. And that's when I thought, well, maybe I'm onto something here, and let me try to figure out how to do this right. And everything built from there.
I think it's everybody's fear when they begin a vegetarian or a vegan regime, that they will lose enjoyment of food, which couldn't be further from the truth, actually, in my experience, because the whole plant kingdom opens up to you in a way that you've never, everything you experience and explore there's so much option and beauty and taste and excitement in it. At least that's been my experience. Would you say the same?
Yeah, I mean, I would say two things. The first thing is it's very similar to early recovery when you think when you give up drugs and alcohol that life is going to be bland and you're never going to have fun anymore. And then you realize, of course, that's not the case. It's quite the opposite. And my experience with eating a plant-based diet is, the world opened up to me. Not only did I feel better, I started to enjoy these foods and I started to crave foods that actually serve me, which is a beautiful thing. And so for me, it started very much from a focus on my own personal health. And you could characterize that as selfish, I suppose. But when you really look at what this lifestyle, avails you and what it promotes, it's a really beautiful way to live, because not only is it a dietary protocol that will help you prevent and even reverse a lot of these chronic illnesses that are killing millions and millions of people. Yes. Heart disease, 1 out of every 3 people in America is going to die of heart disease. 50% of Americans are diabetic or pre-diabetic. 70% of Americans are obese or overweight. It's insane. We are destroying ourselves and it's bankrupting our economy. And 80 to 90% of these conditions are preventable or reversible if you adopt a plant-based diet. So that's amazing. It's also much more environmentally friendly when you look at the negative impact of animal agriculture on our ecology. It's pretty devastating. So you're sort of opting out of that. And it's a beautiful, compassionate way to live, because you're not participating in, this system of slaughtering billions of animals that are, innocent and suffering and often tortured.
Rich, so many people will say and have said that, well, that's great for you. Somehow you worked it out, or maybe your body and your history are the kind of prerequisites that where this could work for them. Do you feel that anyone, and that this is a diet that anyone could adopt if they were willing to go through the transition from eating animal products to a vegan diet?
Yeah, well, I think I would sort of preface my response to that by saying that there's one thing I've learned in recovery, and that's to not give advice and just to share my experience. So that's what I try to do. I try to share my experience, and hopefully people can be inspired or glean some insight from that can benefit them.
It's helpful to do that.
So, it's difficult for me to say everybody should do this, but I have been doing this for 10 years, and I cannot overstate the positive impact that it's had on every aspect of my life, from athletic performance to just living authentically and the advocacy work that I do. But during the course of this 10-year period, I've had the good fortune of meeting thousands and thousands of people. And, I meet so many people who've had similar experiences to mine, their version of my experience, but people who have, literally come back off the deathbed and reversed their heart disease, or gotten off their blood pressure meds, or, cured their type 2 diabetes, like amazing, miraculous stories. People that have had, all kinds of aches and pains or skin conditions or problems that somehow suddenly get resolved.
Yes.
And so from that, I see lots of people who are benefiting. So, again, it's not for me to tell anybody how they should live their life, but I could certainly get behind the idea of encouraging anybody to give it a try. It's just because you're eating vegan doesn't mean it's healthy. You can eat potato chips and Oreos all day long and say, I'm on a vegan diet. It's not about that. It's about eating nutrient-dense, plant-based foods close to their natural state. And the more that you're doing that, and it doesn't have to be 100%, but I think the more that you focus on incorporating those foods onto your plate, the more you're going to crave those kinds of foods. And that's going to kind of reset your trajectory and perhaps put you on a better path towards, better health in the long run.
Would you share some of your favorite foods with people?
Sure. I keep it pretty simple. I'm a big fan of smoothies, my beloved Vitamix blender. So I usually start the day with a green smoothie. There's no one recipe for that, but it generally involves, dark leafy greens as a foundation, kale, spinach, things like that, chard. And then, lots of berries, foods that are high in antioxidants, maybe some turmeric or ginger, coconut water, and then superfoods like spirulina and chia seeds and flax seeds and things like that. Pre-workout, I love beets and beet greens. Those really get me charged up. And then, I sort of graze throughout the day. I like big salads. I love veggie burritos. I eat tons of quinoa and beans, which are high in protein. And my wife is an amazing cook. So, she makes it a lot easier for me. I'm pretty lucky in that regard. But she's been able to come up with quite the rotunda of amazing recipes and sauces that really keep things interesting.
Fabulous. Do you eat breads of any kind?
I'm gluten-free, but I sometimes fall off the bandwagon on that. But I can tell you that when I'm gluten-free, I feel a lot better. So I try my best to eat gluten-free, but every once in a while, I can't resist a piece of sourdough toast. But I try to avoid it. I love some of the new bean pastas that are coming out. You can get pastas that are made with like adzuki beans and edamame and black beans and things like that are delicious and very low carb but high in protein. So I love all of those kind of things. But yeah, gluten free is that's sort of part of my 2017 thing of like getting to the next level, being more mindful of that.
Fantastic. Just out of curiosity, do you drink any form of caffeine?
I'll have a little bit of coffee. I won't lie to you. I love coffee.
It's not a bad thing.
I know.
Just a question.
I've gone off it. I go back on it. The trick for me is if I can have a cup and not have an addictive relationship with it. That's sort of the deal that I've made with myself. If I find myself having a second cup or like reaching for a cup in the afternoon, then it's time to pare it back again.
Yes. Well, we're going to come in just a moment to the body movement, kinetics, and athletic piece of this. But I just wanted to bring up that I do see a direct connection between the food that we eat, and this is my own experience, food that I eat, and a level of what I would call addictive chatter. So I feel that if I'm eating addictively, and I'm in a dance with a variety of different situations in my life, and I find that when I fall into a more addictive pattern of eating, that I notice that I'm in a state of dis-ease in other ways in my thinking and in my life. So I feel there's a direct connection between the food choices that I make and my level of recovery any given 24-hour period. Do you notice anything like that? What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. Just because I don't use drugs and alcohol anymore doesn't mean that I won't, that my inner addict isn't going to reach out and try to use whatever I can to get out of whatever emotional state that I'm experiencing. That is my default. Recovery is whenever I take a contrary action to not engage in that thinking or that behavior pattern. So how can food not be, a crucial sort of component of that, right? So whether it's shopping or gambling or television or pornography or, you name it, it can be absolutely anything that you can, that you find yourself or you catch yourself reaching out for so that you can change your emotional mental state. And escape from whatever it is that you're experiencing is something I think, requires you to look at and kind of parse out and evaluate from a perspective of mindfulness. So without a doubt, you can have an addictive relationship to a healthy plant-based diet if you become crazily obsessive about it to the extent that it's starting to damage your relationships around you and alienate other people. So healthy behaviors can also, turn dark if your relationship with them is not sort of appropriately balanced. And, we're probably going to get into this in a minute, but that's one of the things that comes up with me all the time when people want to ask me about the ultra endurance races that I do, because they just say, well, that's just a manifestation of your alcoholism.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, but let's talk about it. So Rich, you've done, really some absolutely extraordinary things. Many people think about extraordinary things they could do, And the things that you've done don't really even figure into most people's thought process, much less being a reality. So at what point after your the third bottom, right, where you're going to get serious about this plant-based diet and really, really get yourself into physical shape, cardiovascularly in every way, at what point do you start to enter races and start to learn that at 40 plus years old, you've got some chops?
Well, I think to answer that question, it all goes back to what we were talking about earlier, which is that everything is spiritual, and everything that I've done as an athlete is a manifestation of my interest in spiritual growth and expansion. So for me, it began not because I had some desire to become a competitive athlete in my 40s. It began because I suddenly had this sort of resurgence of energy and vitality that left me so energized. I almost felt like I had no choice. I had to go outside and burn it off. I actually had a desire to move my body for the first time in a long time. And so, I pulled an old pair of running shoes out of the closet, and my wife bought me a bike for my birthday. And, I just started slowly leaning into it without any agenda whatsoever, other than the fact that I was enjoying just connecting with myself physically. And I was starting to understand and appreciate that this is something that brought me a tremendous amount of joy as a young person. Like, I loved being a swimmer. I loved going to the pool and pushing myself and seeing what I could do. And it brought me a lot of not just success, but like happiness and fulfillment. But when you get older, that's sort of something you're told, well, that's what kids do. That's not what adults do. And so for me, it was about giving myself permission to just do something that felt good to me, that felt right to me in my very, very, in the core of my spirit. And that was really my driving force. It was like, I'm making this decision to do this because I enjoy doing it. And I'm tired of society telling me what I should and shouldn't do. I'm going to start listening to myself. And the more I did it, the more I enjoyed it. And the byproduct of that, of course, was that I lost all this weight. And I just noticed like I was starting to become a happier person. And as I became more it was like I was starting to fit in my own skin for the first time. After all these years in sobriety, I was finally tapping into this, new realm of being able to kind of align my truest self with, how I was sort of living in the world. And it felt really good. And I was starting to feel like this is something that I should be doing. And so I started doing it more. And each week I got faster and stronger. And the tipping point into competition really came, I guess, to be fully honest, I never realized my potential as an athlete at Stanford because I destroyed my career because of drugs and alcohol. So I felt like there was a stone that was left unturned. But I think much more than that, I was struck with just how resilient the human body is. It's incredible. And you know this from knowing so many people in recovery that just absolutely treat themselves like the worst on the planet, just destroy themselves, and then start treating themselves right. And we blossom like flowers. It's incredible how resilient these, bags of bones and skin are that we live in.
It's remarkable.
And in just a short couple months, I had turned things around so dramatically, and it started getting me thinking like, wow, like this is quite amazing. Like what am I not looking? What are the other blind spots in my life? Like, what if I actually committed to seeing how far I could take this? Like, what am I actually capable of that it never even occurred to me would be something that I could do? And that's what kind of attracted me and ultimately led me into the world of ultra endurance sports, because it seemed like such an amazing template to explore that. And the thing that's really unique about this sort of niche, world of sport is that, it really flies under the radar. There's no money in it. Nobody's paying attention. It's become a lot more popular in recent years, but it doesn't get any media or anything like that. The people that are in it are really in it. They're amazing athletes, but more than that, they're like a lot of spiritual seekers. Like when you train for these races, you got to be by yourself for a very long period of time. And in many ways, it's an active meditation. It's a way of really connecting with yourself. And for me, the training was very much that. As I was struggling with this existential crisis, like, at the time, I'm still a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer anymore, but I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing, what I would like to be doing, what I should be doing. And the only way I could answer these questions for myself would be to go out on the trail by myself for hours and hours and hours and just be with myself and just allow, right? There's an allowance there, like to create that space so that soul could like percolate up and like tell me and lead me. And so it was very much a faith oriented thing of not knowing where it was going to lead, but trusting that I was on this path and that more would be revealed if I just remained, if I had some fidelity to it.
Wow. It's so inspiring and exceptional. And I think I really want to understand how you felt entering competition and actually winning things from that place where you don't have an agenda, that beautiful place of, I'm doing this because I love it. And this is meaningful to me. And I get to touch my true nature here and my true self here. And then you're in it with other people and having this what must be a bonding experience. It's more so in a way than competition in a sense. When you're going that deep and that hard with other people, how does it feel for you, starting to realize like, wow, I'm at the top I'm world class at this.
Yeah, it was crazy. It didn't, and again, that was not an overnight thing. The first big race that I participated in was a race called Ultraman in 2008. And Ultraman is this crazy double Ironman distance, 320 mile, 3-day triathlon that circumnavigates the big island of Hawaii. And I went to that race in 2008. And really my only goal was like not to die and to kind of celebrate this, this miraculous change in my life. At the time, it was right around the time that I celebrated 10 years sober and just this new lifestyle that I'd embraced. And I ended up, I was very kind of like, I wasn't there to race because I didn't know what I was getting involved in. Like I was like, I just want to see if I can finish this thing. And I ended up doing pretty well. I was like 11th overall and sixth, I think I was the second fastest American. But I hadn't answered that question about my ultimate potential. So I figured I'm going to go back to this race. I have a little experience. I'm going to see what I can do. 2009, I led the race after the first day. I had like a 10-minute lead. I crashed my bike on the second day, took me out of podium contention, but I still was able to finish as the fastest American in sixth that year. And that's when I realized like, wow, I'm actually like pretty good at this, and I was 43 at the time.
Yeah.
Like I'm way past my expiration date for this stuff.
I just want to stay on that race for a minute because I have read about it and I'm aware of it. And on day 2 of a race like this, you crash your bike, you hurt your knee and your shoulder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I went down on wet pavement about 30 miles into a 170-mile ride that day. Landed on my knee, swelled up, took all the skin off my left shoulder and broke my pedal actually, which was the biggest sort of hurdle to get over. And I thought I was done. Like, maybe I could deal with this painful knee, but without a pedal, like I'm not going to go 150 miles on one leg, So, but the way these races work is they're very much team efforts because every athlete has to bring their own crew. So every athlete has a van that kind of tags along with them. And the crew members have food and bicycle parts and all this kind of stuff. And I didn't have a backup pedal, but there was a crew member for another athlete that actually had a pedal and got my bike fixed for me. Helped me finish that race that day.
That's remarkable. But what's more remarkable to me is on day 3, you come back and what are you facing on day 3? What do you have to do?
So day 3, well, to set it in context, the first day is a 6.2 mile swim followed by a 90-mile bike ride. The second day, you ride your bike 171 miles. And then the third day, you celebrate the whole craziness by running 52.4 miles, a double marathon. So,
You hurt your knee on day 2.
So on day 2, I had this crash. And I thought, like, I'm done. And then this guy fixes my bike, which I was not happy about, by the way. I was almost glad to be done, you know. And
I understand.
so I just suffered through an incredibly painful 150 miles, and figured, well, I got through that, but like, there's no way I'm running tomorrow. Like, that night I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs. I iced my knee. It was swollen. Like, I just thought it's not going to be a good idea to run the next day. But like I said, these are kind of like these races, this race, Ultraman in particular. It's really a beautiful experience. It's limited to just 35 people it's invitation only, 35 athletes from around the world. And it's a world championship event. So of course, like, there are athletes that are vying for the title and the podium and all of that. But more than that, the kind of whole intention behind it is that every athlete and crew member who participates in this experience, as a result of going around this island over 3 days, has a really, transformative, life transformative spiritual experience. And I can tell you that is the case for myself and everybody that I know that has done this race. And so in that spirit, in Hawaiian, they call it ohana, the spirit of family. I thought, I'm going to go to the starting line for the run, and just with my fellow athletes, and maybe I'll walk a little bit, and, that'll be it, just in solidarity with them. And, I did that and started walking when the gun went off, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll jog a little bit. Let me see how this feels. Started jogging, and I was like, I think it's holding up okay. It hurt, but like, it seemed to be, manageable. Tried a little bit of running, seemed stable. And then before I knew it, I was just running, and I just kept going and started working my way up the field and passing people. And by the time I finished that, I'd worked my way up from way down at the bottom, because I'd lost so much time during that bike, up to sixth position for the race. So,
well, I want to I want to share with viewers today that Rich, when I was planning this interview with Rich, he sent me an email and said, would you like to get together? I think you even intimated that you said maybe we'd go out and run or bike or something.
Whatever you want to do.
Right. Whatever you want to do. And my answer to that was absolutely not. because you fall under this category of people that I consider, in a light and loving way, I say this, batshit crazy. And I can't expose myself and risk myself in these ways. Not at my current level.
I'm gonna convert you. You'll see.
You'll convert me?
Yeah.
I'm so open to it. No, I've been an athlete my whole life, and I love it. And working with limitations, but I would so enjoy. We'll get something on the books at some point if you're willing to.
Yeah, for sure.
To deal with someone like me, but just a quick question: Were you the only one in the field, or generally, are you the only one in these races and these events that you go to that is on a plant-based diet?
Less so now. I think in 2008, 2009, I was the first guy to finish Ultraman who was on a plant-based diet. Now you're seeing more and more athletes that are doing it. But I think the fact that I was one of the earlier people to have, sort of conquered races like this on a vegan diet ended up getting, that's what attracted a bunch of media attention, because people were like, how do you do something so athletic without eating animal products? How does that even make sense? And so, a lot of the work that I've done since, and the advocacy that I do is around that very idea of helping people rethink nutrition and kind of deprogramming people from a lot of the marketing hype and misinformation that we've been taught our whole lives.
Yes. Now, Rich, how would you respond to people who really are, let's say they're on a path of recovery, and they've reached that point right before that second bottom? Like they're sober. They don't want to use drugs and alcohol anymore, and maybe it's been a number of years. But they also have that feeling that grows in them each day, that nagging feeling that there's something more. There's something more to life. And I'm not sure what it is for me, but there's something more, and I'm scared. And I don't know what to do. How would you respond to somebody in that position?
The first thing I would say is I completely understand and am sympathetic to that emotional state because I've lived through that. And then I would say that there is no stasis in life. As you know, every thought, every decision, every word that comes out of your mouth, every behavior that you undertake is either moving you towards recovery or away from recovery. And spiritual evolution, similarly, is not static. It must continue to move forward. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to understand that even if we no longer crave drugs and alcohol, that this is just the beginning of our quest for spiritual expansion. And that's a quest that you should remain vigilant about till the day that you die, because we'll never reach the destination of that. And so if you're feeling that pang in your gut or your soul, that there is something inside of you that is underexpressed, even if you don't know what that is, I think it's important to pay attention to that and to try to find a way to, spark the pilot light of that. And I think the process of unpacking that begins with trying to get really clear with who you are. Like you've got to remove the addictive behavior patterns and thought patterns and get really clear. You've got to do enough inside work so that you can reliably trust your instincts as they arise as true and not confuse them with, self-will and ego and the like. But if you are clear enough to be able to have that level of discernment, then you can start to trust and rely on those instincts as they arise and take action on them. And that's where faith comes in. But often it's not going to make sense. It's probably not going to win you any popularity contests. I can tell you, I was going through crazy financial pressure when I was training for my first Ultraman. Everybody was like, what are you doing? You're being irresponsible. Go back to your office. But I just knew I had to see this through. I knew that somehow this was important in the grand scheme of creating a new life. And I didn't know what that looked like. I couldn't make sense of any of it other than to understand that it was important that I see that through. And I had a support system. And that's really important as well. My wife was very supportive of that. In fact, when I was thinking, I can't do this anymore, she's like, this is what you need to be doing. It must come first. Because she's a much more spiritually evolved person than I am. But the point remains the same, which is that you have to take stock and invest in yourself and to create healthy boundaries around those things. So it doesn't mean you're going to up and quit your job or change things overnight. It's about just starting to cultivate that little voice inside you and allow that to kind of lead you in perhaps a new direction. And, a year from now, 5 years from now, your life might look a lot different, but hopefully you will find a way to be more fulfilled and a means for living more authentically.
Well, thank you so much, Rich. I know people who are watching today are going to want to come find you and interact with your offerings in the world. Can you speak a little bit about where they can find those and intersect with your teachings and your offerings?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. My website's richroll.com. I'm at Rich Roll on Twitter and Instagram. My podcast is called the Rich Roll Podcast. Much like this program, I do long form interviews with inspiring people, all different kinds of people, people in health, fitness, spirituality, artists, entrepreneurs, and the like. So people can check that out. And I've got 2 books, Finding Ultra, which is my memoir, and The Plant Power Way, which is the cookbook and lifestyle guide, all plant-based.
Well, you guys, there's a lot of incredible information coming out of this man every week. And I want to say that I'm a personal fan of his podcast. So check that out. The 2 books he mentioned, Finding Ultra and The Plant Power Way, incredible. So pick them up. And if you want to go deeper into this stuff, really take his advice and, light the pilot light. I in my course term, I would say, light a fire underneath your butt and go for it and live the life that you feel you're meant to live. And Rich, I'm so grateful to you for your time today and for, offering your wisdom, your strength, your hope, your experience to this audience. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much, Tommy. It was beautiful to talk to you today, and the feeling is mutual. I love the work that you're doing. It's helping a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that are suffering unnecessarily. And so, to the extent that I can help amplify your message and get the word out about the work that you're doing, I'm happy to do that. Because if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, and you're stuck in that cycle of addiction, you're drinking, you're using, and you can't seem to find a way out of it, there is hope and there is help. You can reach out to me, of course, anytime with questions about sobriety, and you don't ever have to drink or use again.
Love it. Well, folks, Rich Roll, I look forward to a run or a bike at some point. I can't swim, so I'm not committing to that. But I look forward to future collaborations, and we'll speak really soon. Thank you again.
Thanks, Tommy. Take care.
Right.
Bye.